on all, welcome. First up, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we are meeting on, the Ngunnawal people, and I wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing cultures and the contribution they make to the life of the city in this region. We'd also like to acknowledge and welcome the any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people who may be attending today's event. Also, I'd like to welcome you all, but in particular, we've gone international, and I'd like to welcome Professor Masao Onobi from Okayama University, because we're international. And as I said, everybody here is welcome, people from Downer and Watson and all over the place. So it's amazing. Okay, first up tonight, we have attendance and apologies. I hope everybody signed the book. Somebody did send me an apology and I've lost it, but I will note it in the minutes. Okay, first up tonight, we have a presentation by Edwina Robinson, who's Executive Officer of Sea Change, to discuss various aspects of what Sea Change is up to. She's worked in Canberra as a landscape architect and with the ACT government building urban wetlands, which must have been a fun job. I'm jealous. She recently left the role with the ACT Commissioner for Sustainability and Environment, that's hard to say, and Environment, to work closer with the community to create a more sustainable Canberra. Okay, so welcome Edwina.
Thank you.
You can come up and we'll do your...
Can I close that door? The feng shui's.
Sure. Yes, by all means. And we'll put your little presentation here up.
Hello.
Oh, we've got
all.
to swap cables.
Lots of you look really familiar to me, so hi Mars. I actually have a cold and I'm on kind of, Codral cold tablets, so if I sound really vague or really hyper, you can just blame those.
It's just there.
And I go to...
Oh, F5 maybe? Is F5 good?
Just about to turn this back on.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
There we go. So if you, I can direct your thing while
you can.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll try and be nice to you and get it right.
So I'm going to talk to you about Sea Change. So we actually have our office next door here. So we're in room 4, which we rent from the Downer Community Association. Sorry, what's your name?
Dennis.
Dennis, there's special clicking we need to do. So we need to click in the middle here. I might have to drive it, I think, because it's not going to... Oh, yeah. I think I'll probably drive it. Okay, so we're basically in the room next door. Oops. Oh, no.
Did the mouse move for you?
We just want to go to the next... Oh, here we go. Oh. Okay. So, as Dennis mentioned, I've got a background in urban waterways. So I worked with the ACT government for 6 years. So 5 of those years was building some of the inner north wetlands as well as the valley ponds at Gungala. And it was a really great job. And I was really lucky that I got to do a lot of community engagement in that time and met quite a few Canberra people and made a number of friends as well. So I actually met John during that period. The other thing I've been involved in is I've always been interested in sustainable buildings and in particular small buildings. So we have in our backyard 2 tiny houses. So you can see bottom left, there's an example there. My oldest son converted a shipping container into a tiny house and I actually lived in that for 9 months. There's lots of pros and cons of living in shipping containers and converting them, and it's quite expensive as well. So I would really not recommend doing that. But we also have a second tiny house called the 90-day house, which Lachlan built in 90 days while he was working full-time at Thor's Hammer. So you can see in the bottom example, we've got 20 people in our shipping container, and it was only a 6 metre shipping container, but we actually did some extensions and a couple of the areas. We managed to fit those 20 people in there, and if you want to go onto the Sea Change website, there's actually a video of that, so you can go and have a look at that. And as Dennis mentioned, my last role was as a Commissioner for Sustainability and the Environment as a Communications Manager there. So there you can see us. I'd actually borrowed a electric bike from Switched On Cycles and got to zoom around Canberra for a week. I actually rented it. So something else I'm really interested in, and I don't know if any of you heard it the other day, I was interviewed on ABC on 666 on Monday or Tuesday. And I'm actually doing a year of buying no new clothes. And so for those of you in the audience, particularly the men, you probably think I was somewhat. But often women, or lots of women, tend to buy a lot of clothes and a lot of fast fashion. So what I've been doing is I've been exploring things like eco-dye. So for example, you can see up there a second-hand garment that I've used now, Brittle Gum. They're the magnificent ones that line Northbourne Avenue with the white trunks. They give you that incredible red colour. So just playing around with natural materials. This scarf I've got on is a woolen scarf, and it's dyed with indigo. So indigo is a plant, it's actually a Japanese plant, but we can grow it here in Australia from places like Mount Tamborine. We've got an event coming on Wednesday the 30th of August called the Sustainable Wardrobe, and we've got a number of speakers at that. We're running that with the Canberra Environment Centre, and that will be at the Drill Hall Gallery. I believe it's meant to be booked out, so. But you know, if you're desperate to come, if you turn up at the door, I doubt whether we'll send you away. So, Sea Change. So we're a grassroots organisation, and when I say grassroots, I suppose we're focused on what actions we can take as individuals or people in a street, or perhaps even bigger scale at the neighbourhood or suburban scale. We're not for profit. We do readily accept donations. We don't get very many. And we're also funded predominantly through the ACT government, the Environment and Planning Directorate. And we also rely on volunteers. So you can see with these images we've got, so in the office we've got myself, I work 4 days a week, and Jennifer Tonner, who's our project officer, she works 3 days a week. So you can see Jennifer there on the left-hand side. But we do rely on volunteers. So there's a volunteer, Nola. She's taking equipment to go to an open house. We have Sustainable House Days once a month. So you can go and have a look at what's coming up on our website. So the next Sustainable House Day is at Coombs, I think. And there we've got 2 volunteers on the right. So volunteers can come and do anything from help us with our books to help us with our website. Now, so 2 of the organisations we collaborate closely with are the Conservation Council and the Canberra Environment Centre. So quite a few of you would know Larry O'Loughlin. Larry was in the ACT government for a long time, and Ryan, both very nice men. We also get our money from the same government funding, so it kind of makes sense that we collaborate together. Oh, I thought there was something else on that page. Maybe there's not. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, and something that Sea Change is very big on, is trying to reduce our environmental footprint. And for some people, the notion of an environmental footprint is a bit hard to understand, but basically on average, each Canberran uses 8.9 global hectares per person. So if everyone continued to use the Earth's resources as we do, we're going to be in deep doo-doo. And so what can we do about that? And I came across an interesting video today by this man, Jason Hickel, and he's talking about, you know, the idea that we continuously use gross domestic product as an indicator of how well we are doing. But there's many other indicators that we can use. So there's, for example, the people of Bhutan have the indicator, I think is it the wellbeing indicator or the happiness indicator. So there's starting to be these conversations happening in environmental circles that we need to be reassessing growth and money at any cost. And that probably has a very strong link into our planning system in Canberra, is that, you know, many of us know that the ACT government is quite reliant on money that comes through land sales. So this image I like is from a well-known street artist called Banksy. And it's called Shop Till You Drop. And if anyone went to their letterbox yesterday, you may have actually got the IKEA catalogue. Hands up, anyone get the IKEA catalogue in their letterbox? Maybe they were only dropping them in you're in Turner?
O'Connor.
I'm in O'Connor, so maybe they haven't done you yet.
Yeah, I think I did see it.
Okay.
Go and look at that.
So inside that catalogue was a little slip that said shop online anytime. Okay, so there's this continual pressure for us to be shopping and buying and purchasing. So you can start looking at what we buy in terms of what we consume, the top 10 items for Canberrans. And this is based on research from an academic who was at Sydney University, Chris Day, and he's spelled D-E-Y, and he did this work for the Commissioner for Sustainability and the Environment. So living in a climate like we do that has extremes, we spend quite a bit of our income on heating and cooling our homes. But we also need to recognise that a lot of our housing stock isn't very good at keeping that heat and that cool in, and a lot of our external landscapes don't help that either. Who can tell me what I've tried to depict in that middle image on the left there that caused a bit of a hoo-ha maybe last year or earlier in the year?
Must be some avocado.
Smashed avocado. So all those young, are they Gen Zs or whatever they were, they were never going to be able to afford a house because they were all eating out on the smashed avocado. There's a poached egg there as well. What I've done is I've actually grouped like categories together. So eating out groceries and beer and malt take up a lot of our footprint. There's statistics for Australia that show for every 5 bags of groceries we buy, we end up wasting one of them. So it either ends up in the bin, probably as landfill. And also petrol is, and you know, we've got not a great public transport system here in Canberra, and we have a very dispersed city. Obviously there's moves afoot to make it denser in certain areas and to get some sort of transport corridor happening along Northbourne Avenue. So, there's your gas. And you're probably all aware, you know, about 5 years ago I put in a new, you know, gas heater because at the time I thought, you know, gas was sustainable, and now I'm being told we're phasing out gas in the ACT. Interestingly, we've got a group that's become part of Sea Change that's called, I might get this name wrong, Steady State Economy. And one of the women, very quietly spoken woman, piped up, and this group's concerned about gross domestic product being used as a measure of success. And she was saying that she was very concerned about the environment and climate change, and she'd always lived quite frugally. But she's gone out, she hasn't bought herself a Tesla, but she bought herself, I think it was an Audi, an electric car, as well as a power wall for her house. So, you know, there's these arguments that we shouldn't be spending lots of money, but there might be a good argument for spending money on items like that. Air travel. So air travel takes up quite a bit of our footprint. Lots of us imagine going places like this. So this is Mount Fuji. So I think in 2015, Japan was one of the most researched places to go overseas. I don't know if that actually meant people actually went there. The other thing that has a big impact on our environmental footprint is our home ownership, so building of homes and the embodied energy, as well as the furniture we put in those homes. And my passion at the moment is about clothes. that has a big impact on our footprint as well. This is the fact sheet, so it's not easy to see on there, but that is available on the Commissioner for Sustainability's website. If you're interested in having a look at that information more closely, it's just called the Ecological Footprint Fact Sheet. So a little bit more about Sea Change. So we've got a number of active groups who do a lot of our work. So we have a Gungahlin group that are focused on transition streets. Now, do you have my book? Is my book? Thank you. Transition Streets is a program we've recently relaunched, and every one of you here would be able to participate in Transition Streets. So basically what it's about is getting together with your neighbours, having a conversation with them, and seeing if they're interested in going through this workbook. And it goes through a whole range of topics like waste, energy, electricity, and it's just a way of perhaps coming up with less impactful ways to live, but at the same time connecting more to your neighbours. You can see here, this looks like it was an inner north sort of sea change meeting. We've got Mark Spain there, they're very involved with Canberra City Farm as well, which is no longer at Turner, which is now down at Jerrabomberra Wetlands. So they do, there was an activity maybe last year or the year before, they tried to find the coldest house in Canberra, and they got together to work out ways. So they had various insulation and curtains and that sort of thing there. And we also get involved with events with the Conservation Council and the Canberra Environment Centre. The other activity we sponsor is the Parliament of Youth. And we've actually got a project officer position going at the Parliament at the moment. And the Parliament of Youth is an event that happens once a year, and all the kids get to present their ideas on reducing their impact on the environment to members of the Legislative Assembly. So recently the ACT government sort of had a key focus on 4 ways we could get to zero net emissions by 2050. So they're around things like energy efficiency that the government's done a lot of work towards, transport, waste and building design. Something's meant to come up here. Oh, here we go. That's our Transition Streets booklet, and that's available online. Here, some of you may have heard about the people in Gilmore Street in Hackett who got together and they've got a little stall that you can buy vegetables that the people are growing from the street. They've also got a pancake day, I think, on Saturdays, and they're also running something called Magic Kitchen, which is vegan food sold out of a fridge there. So as I mentioned before, we've got sustainable days each month, sustainable house days, and we also incubated the business Solar Share, so that's the solar community owned farm. So transport, obviously we'd be encouraging you to be thinking of alternative modes of transport. You'll be well aware that we have high rates of obesity. I think it's not so bad in the inner north, and I hope no one's from Tuggeranong, and I hope you don't get offended. But the people in Tuggeranong have quite bad health outcomes, get the least amount of exercise and the highest rates of obesity. So, you know, maybe we're really lucky living in the inner north. We also have cargo and cargo trailers for hire and child trailers. So Transition Streets, as I mentioned, we also support things like the Repair Cafe and food waste. Or doing something about food waste. Building design, so something, as I mentioned, I was interested in. Here's the little 90-day house in my back garden in Canberra. As well as Sea Change has put in for the ACT government's zero net emissions grant to try and have a display home out at Ginninderry that showcases a whole lot of sustainability initiatives. So if you're interested in becoming a member, I've got some membership forms down the front. It's only $25 for individuals, $50 for organisations. You can also go on to our website and calculate your ecological footprint. And I always get depressed when I calculate my ecological footprint because I'm really good on things like transport, but then terrible because I go on overseas holidays. And I eat meat too, so they'll ask you about, you know, do you mainly have a food-based diet, or how many times a week do you eat meat? And meat's not good either, but you know. So there you can go and calculate your footprint. If you join up to Transition Streets, we ask you to calculate your footprint before and after. If you need more information, you can contact me at the office, or we also have a website, Sea Change, and we have Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. So are there any questions? Yes, John.
Just to kick you off, I
Yes.
notice you seem to focus more on the demand side. What about the supply side of the equation by working with manufacturers to get them to modify their behaviour? Because I often see that there is a focus amongst consumers to reduce palm oil consumption, for example. But where's the pressure on the manufacturers? So it's going to be supplied supplied to a large degree anyway. And think about the embodied energy component in what you consume. I'll pick on beer because that's a beer.
Yeah.
I would, without seeing what the algorithms are and the calculations behind it, if you're like me and drink the Wigan Pen and Bespoke beer plus brew your own, I reckon my beer impact would be pretty limited. But
okay, so that's a big kind of question and a series
do you
of
work
statements.
with any people, any businesses in Fishwick or Mitchell and say, hey mate, how about having I could give myself a little drum using my model as a producer for having as low as possible ecological footprint that I can possibly conceive.
Yeah. So maybe going back to sort of the palm oil example, I definitely believe there's a role in consumers being better educated and putting pressure on the places they purchase things from. Sorry, my head's not.
No, but do you work with businesses in Fishwick, Mitchell, Kew, wherever?
We don't work with many businesses. So one of the businesses we have done work with is someone like Switched On Cycles, and so Switched On Cycles import electric bikes. So another O'Connor organisation, and we've had bulk bike buys with them. So that's an example of working with an organisation. But we don't work with a lot. Most of the organisations we're working with are the not-for-profits and who have an advocacy role around the environment. It's Leon, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The ACT government's zero net emissions by 2050 only takes into account emissions that happen within the territory.
I believe that's the case,
Now, when you look at electricity, for example, there haven't been any emissions from electricity production in the territory since 1957.
It's flawed then, isn't it?
And most of the items on your list of the 10 most environmentally impacting things aren't actually included in that target. Does Sea Change have a position on that target? Does it support it?
The zero net emissions target. I've only been in the role 5 weeks, so I really don't know. But I do know, so with that work that was done by Sydney University, I don't know how the calculations for electricity were derived, whether or not they took into account, because don't we get some of our energy from South Australia?
We have a renewable electricity target, which is not the same as our zero net emissions target. They're defined differently.
Sorry, I can't actually answer a lot of that question. So, but if you wanted to email me, I'd be more than happy to try and find some answers for you. Yes.
You mentioned the Repair Cafe. Is there one in Canberra?
So there's a Repair Cafe started earlier in the year through the Canberra Environment Centre. So for those of you who are on Facebook, you can go and find it on Facebook. It's very, it's kind of quite ad hoc, but it's good fun. And it was originally run on an afternoon, but it's happening once a month, and I think it might be happening on a Saturday now. So if you just type in Repair Cafe Canberra, you'll find it. Yes, Miles.
Are you optimistic about Canberra? Do you feel there's a groundswell of people wanting to change, or we've still got a long way to go?
I think that's a really good question. I think if you look at numbers that are a bit depressing, like our ecological footprint, I think there needs to be a really radical shift in the way we think and do things. And I think this kind of growth at all costs doesn't seem to be the way to go. And I'm starting to see a lot more people talking about working less, maybe working 3.5 days a week, simpler. But I have to see the prices houses are going for at the moment, and for those of us who've got children or grandchildren, you know, like it seems quite unaffordable. And how are they going to get to those goals if they're going to have to work incredibly hard, and both in jobs if they're ever going to achieve that? And is that the dream? Should it be the dream? I don't know. Yes, Jochen.
What's so frustrating is that there is a schizophrenic situation there in the ACT. At the same time where government and business wants to have 1 million people. And
do you mean in terms of our target for population?
Target population growth.
I don't think we'll be alive then.
Where we have situations like big new townships being built, like Molongoles, that looks like Los Angeles in the 70s. There's no attempt to put public transport in first before people move in. Or if you look at the housing regulations, like in Hackett, there are several examples where houses become huge houses. The block is full. So there is it's really commendable that the ACT government has these goals, but I don't see systematic changes in planning, in long-term building regulations and so on. And so it's very commendable that Sea Change offers opportunities for individuals to do something, but at the same time around us things actually move in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and I think in a way, Sea Change, if you can start making changes in your street, I think that can make a difference. Just to give you a bit of an idea, I live in, what's I only found out recently, it's called the Lentil Belt. But I'm in a nice little cul-de-sac, corner, and started a conversation with people on my street. So it was the first time I'd invited them all over and talk about, did we want to get together in our street and do something about the environment? And I was really surprised that lots of people on my street, although people were living in houses, weren't composting, whereas people had gardens, and I didn't understand why. So we just did something really simple, like we had a spare worm farm, so we set up the worm farm on the nature strip and invited people around to come and learn how to set up a worm farm. So I think it's those really simple actions. I know that's a tiny piece of the problem, but I think in many ways if we wait for government, we're going to be, having worked in government for a long time, and yes, they do some things really well, like I think our urban wetlands is a really good example of that. But I think if we wait for government, we'll be waiting for too long, and we need to be doing stuff ourselves.
Yeah, but the government is actually doing things right in the opposite direction.
Well, I have no control over that,
Yeah,
nor do you.
We all have control over it.
Well, we do to a certain extent, as our voting power and our lobbying power, but I think that doesn't mean we should be complacent. We should do our own stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
Edwina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And, I've got to reorganise so we can. Okay. Next up, once we get our computers all organised.
I can probably pull that out.
You got.
Oh, that's my.
anything else down here for you?
I don't know if you can unthread that.
Next up, we have a presentation from Purdon Planning about a development in Campbell. I have the presentation about to appear. If I can get the plug in.
So I've got to get lost. How are you going getting yours in?
With great difficulty. There it goes. Okay. Are we?
I'm nearly gone.
Not coming up.
Should be up now.
That work?
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
There's all too much technology.
Way too many laptops going.
Yes.
Technical hiccup, that's all right.
Is it? What's happening?
Eruptions.
Hey.
Unplug both of them at the same time for some reason.
Fantastic. Do you mind if I use the mouse to drive?
No, quite all right. If you wish to.
Thanks very much.
You should be able to get it from there, just quick as you go.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we've overcome our technical difficulty, whatever. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Hello everybody, I'm Richard Nash. I'm from Purdon Planning, and I'm here on behalf of the Anglican Diocese of Canberra and Gungahlin. Very interesting presentation from Edwina. I don't know if I could go a whole year without buying clothes. I tend to go through a pair of shoes every few months, which brings a whole new definition to a footprint, I suppose. Just in terms of the proposal, where the Anglican Diocese owns the 51 Rosenthal, which is a community site, where the diocese is looking at reusing the site, so proposing 8 supportive housing units on the development. And just to give you a bit of perspective, we're just behind the War Memorial there, and it's just sitting in Campbell. Is everyone familiar with the site? Yep. Sort of. Okay. There we go. So that's just to bring things into perspective there. So in terms of the zoning, we've got a community zoned site. It sits next to an urban open space here, and the rest of the suburb is zoned RZ1. So Cox Architecture are the architects on this proposal, and they've proposed essentially a contemporary design that is commensurate with the existing suburb. So it is quite subdued and quite low key.
Sorry, how many storey high?
2.
Can you please walk us through that map?
Walk you through the map?
Where we are.
Okay, very good. So you've just got Anzac Parade here,
Yeah.
the War Memorial there. So just to the east of that, you've got Treelaw Crescent, and we're along Rosenthal Street here. So it's in between Rosenthal and Fairbairn. Yep. Comfortable with that? Yeah, good.
Are there any other developments in the area similar?
No.
No, they are. They are. There are single dwelling units throughout.
Bottom line, no multiple.
Thank you. So that's just a.
A bit of a precedent, then,
Yes.
It is, and I'll get to the details of the development as we move through. So once again, it's looking at reusing the site. Essentially, the diocese has looked at a number of options for reuse of the site and has settled on supportive housing as the greatest use, which is aligned with the diocese mission. So supportive housing targeted at over 55s, and that also fits in with the community zoned land.
Currently it's church land, isn't it?
That's correct.
Essentially, that's one of those church things that were given free to the churches, so that they are in fact belong to the community.
That's correct, and essentially in terms of it belongs to the diocese, so the diocese holds the lease, and they're looking at doing a use that helps people of Campbell age in place. It's targeted at over 55s, and it will be supportive housing.
So is it designed to assist the community, or
it's designed as adaptable units, so effectively that will be for example, the stairwells are able to hold a wheelchair lift if so desired. The buildings will have a call button within them, and there will be supportive services that will be available to service each of the units.
So that little painting that you had last,
yes,
that looked like you had blocks.
It's 8 units in total.
8 single units.
8 supportive housing units in total. Yes.
With one unit per person, per family.
Well, it really depends. It could be a couple. It could be a couple downsizing. It could be.
It just looked very bulky in that picture.
I'll get to some of the. I suppose that perspective can be a little bit misleading. The development itself is actually nestled into a site that slopes away, so I'll show you some perspectives shortly.
So would you mind just define what you mean by supportive housing?
Supportive housing, strictly speaking in terms of the territory definition is, and it is a bit obtuse, but supportive housing is for people who are in need of support. So that may be people who have mobility issues, and maybe just various needs. So the houses themselves will, the units themselves will have emergency call buttons. There'll be groundskeeping facilities, and there'll be other types of services that will be available.
So 4 people per person, is that?
Will there be attended?
Sorry?
4 people per unit, is that roughly?
Well, that could be possible, but it could be a single person living in any of these dwellings.
So,
Excuse me, guys. Look, if you don't mind, can we keep most of the questions till the end?
And I will get to I'm sure I will answer most of these questions in running through the proposal as well. So essentially it's targeted at ageing in place. It will be targeted for over 55s. Once again, it is supportive housing. There will be 2 parking spaces per unit, and there'll be visitor parking available. There'll also be non-residential visitors, so there'll be the service providers will be able to park on the site. So essentially all parking is contained on the site. There will be retention of vegetation on the site as far as practicable, and the project team have walked the site with the ACT government, and we've also talked about some offsets nearby to plant trees where other trees have been, where it's unavoidable that some trees will be removed. So this is just the layout of the site. So it is quite a low-key development for the site. The site does slope away from Rosenthal towards Fairbairn. And this just shows the layout. It is nestled in with the vegetation on the site. I will get to materials palette, which is quite a contemporary look and feel with materials that are aligned with Campbell and with Canberra. So use of materials such as red brick. And I will get to the materials. Apologies. So it is a split level site. It's cut over 2 levels. So to that degree, there will be 2 accesses from Rosenthal to deal with that split site. And as you can see, it is quite low profile, and it is in keeping with the existing buildings that are in the suburb. This is a perspective looking down from Rosenthal towards the corner of the site, and you can see that it is, once again, there will be a lot of vegetation around it. It is quite low key. And this is just a view directly into the site. So once again, the materials provided, looking at timber cladding, red brick used for the facility, charcoal concrete, which is commensurate not only with developments around there, but also with the War Memorial. So that's aligned with that material palette. Now the Crown lease arrangement, the diocese currently holds the lease, so they would not be looking at titling. They'd be looking at a sublease arrangement for those 8 supportive housing units. The lease purpose clause is for a bishop's residence, so there will be a need to go through a lease variation, and there will be a lease variation charge assigned with that. We are currently in discussions with the ACT government with regards to a concessional lease status. If that is the case, we will have further discussions as the project unfolds. So once again, it is community facility zone, and supportive housing aligns with that use. The diocese did look at a number of other potential community uses and settled on supportive housing as it aligns best with the diocese mission, and in terms of ageing in place, providing facilities for people over 55 and supporting the community. So we've done some preliminary studies in regards to traffic impacts. They will be extremely minor. So we're looking at approximately a 7% increase in the traffic for the area. So very low key. So that's 40 vehicles over the course of a day. So you're looking at potentially about 4 an hour, which is quite low. The visual impact has been reduced by having a subdued design, and with the slope of the site, it means that it's actually nestled into the landscape. So you're not actually going to see it is sort of aligned with the existing buildings in the suburb. There will be temporary traffic management plans that will be developed to minimise any kind of impacts, and I'll show you in the next slide. There's no overshadowing impacts on the surrounding residences. So in terms of the DA process, we're currently in the pre-DA community consultation phase. We'll be looking at ramping up our DA process in the coming weeks. There will be opportunity to provide comments not only tonight but also on our website, and we have more information available to you. Now, just to walk through the key benefits, it provides a facility for people that age in place. It's well-designed, adaptable accommodation. It's consistent with the local residential area. Well connected to active travel, walking distance to Mount Ainslie, and views onto prominent Canberra sites. Now, in terms of provision of the subleases, which I skimmed over unfortunately, but the sublease will be available to the diocese parish, but also to the open market. Okay, so I can open it up for questions now. Yes?
I've got quite a few questions. So firstly, why there was almost no consultation even when it was initially proposed. Got finished, it's got architectural plans, you've got drawings, you're already talking about changing leasehold provisions with the local government, and as such, local consultation as being nil apart from a little piece of paper that arrived in the letterbox. Looking at your architectural drawings, they actually don't fit in with the street. The street is a red brick with tiled roofs. They're not, none of them are flat. You need to look at it. None of them have any of those kind of, they're basically brick or rendered.
Sure.
So really, you have to be honest and say the architectural style is in no way reflective of the street. It's what the architects deem.
Well, I mean, arguably the architecture is a contemporary take on the old design, so you can't expect all developments to be built in the same way forever.
You could have pitched roofs.
Sure,
would
sure.
have made a big difference.
But realistically, that would provide more of a visual impact to the street if you were to have pitched roofs. It would potentially, arguably have more of
I
an
noticed
overshadowing
that
impact.
you've got block of 4 on the rise. And there hasn't been any cut in. You could cut the impact to the actual visual impact across to the War Memorial, because that parkland area, which is, I think, belongs in part to the War Memorial one, because they do all the tree planting and everything in that area.
It's unleased territory land to the side there, and it is actually quite a distinct rise. So if you have been out on the site, the views, particularly from the War Memorial, you wouldn't be able to see this facility, and vice versa.
How far down are you dropping? Because I noticed in one of the things when you did the little thing, you showed the bottom story of the building and a little bit of a sketchy plan of the top, the second story.
Sure, so that's a response to the slope of the site. So the site actually slopes away, and it is on two
I know
distinct
how
levels.
it slopes. I know how it slopes. Then there's a very high ridge area before you get to the park. You could drop the buildings down even further.
Sure.
They look incredibly bulky in that.
Yeah, that's probably not a very flattering.
See that one there
Yes.
on the left? Now you've got, that almost gives the impression that it doesn't go further than the level of the site. But looking at that little sketchy bit on top of it, it does go significantly above the ground level of the park next door.
Okay, it would be difficult and probably ill-advised to cut in that far and have the building underneath the rise for solar access purposes, for all manner of issues in terms of the earthworks that would be required.
Oh yes, it would be more expensive.
Well, I mean, the solar access would be vastly impacted if you've got a building that's sitting in. You wouldn't be able to capture a lot of the sun.
But aren't you my understanding was you're going to heavily plant trees behind the building on that area.
There will be trees planted.
So won't that affect the solar aspects of it if you have lots of trees there?
Not as much as a dirt rise.
All right, and then my other issue is my understanding was that the Anglican Church wasn't going into a significant aged care facility process, and this one will there be staff on site?
There won't be staff on site. There will be call buttons, and the sites will be serviced. And basically,
and they'll be serviced from where?
Well, that's open. So there'll be a number of services available.
So they'll be contracting service people to come in
potentially
and
yes.
provide services.
Potentially yes.
And as for parking, you know that there is completely no parking around that corner.
So all parking will be contained on the site.
And it's a particularly dangerous area, that right, because it's a significant rat run.
It's on a bend as well, isn't it, there?
Eh?
It's quite a nasty bend there, isn't it?
It's a rat, and it's a very nasty bend, and it's a rat run from Trustpot Avenue. People come up to miss the roundabout and that big mishmash that's
onto
there.
Fairburn,
So they come up straight up there, straight up the top of Roselands, drop down and go in under there. So it already has a significant amount of traffic on that area as well.
Yeah, so as I stated, you'd be looking at possibly an increase of about 4 cars during peak hour.
How do you model that?
That's for the traffic engineers to talk to, but it's basically modelled on generation rates, which are dictated by the territory. So that would mean that you've got 8 units, and therefore you've got a set number of a generation rate over those peak hour times. The added issue that these will be marketed to over 55, so you'll have a lot of retirees in there, so therefore you do get a lot less.
You still have 2 cars.
Potentially.
Chiefly 2 cars.
There's space for 2 cars.
16 cars plus staff.
At an absolute most.
Yeah. I reckon you'll get quite my name's Andrew Butts. I live on 2 Rosendale, so I declare interest to see my neighbour here.
That's going to be average. I mean, I quite like it. I mean, personally, we like the idea of the ageing in place. I'm not buying it. It'd be great. Usually, I won't be too long before I'll be over 50. My house will be too big. But that will be your issue, I think. It's a narrow street. You know, people pulling out at low speed from units there into the middle of that rat run is
there was a development done on the other side.
It's going to be a problem.
On the opposite side, there was a development done a few years ago where they wanted to put, sorry,
On the other
directly
side of
across the road from your site, there's a dual occupancy before they changed the rules about dual occupancy. They wanted to put four dwellings on that block, and it was knocked back because of the traffic issues.
Certainly.
So it's just it's deemed then that the road is a real rat run, and it is very. So that's I'm the same. I'm not all that concerned about, but the traffic is.
Yeah, certainly, and we'll definitely take that on board. But arguably, the traffic impact would be significantly reduced because you're not having 4 sort of 25 to 50-year-olds who are going to work every day. You will have a mixture of over 55s and retirees.
Vehicles coming in, the service vehicles. And
service vehicles, but they would be throughout the day rather than during peak times.
Do you know how long the construction period's going to last?
It will be probably 9 to 12 months.
Question to the right.
Sorry, before we leave this traffic issue, I'm actually on the eastern side. Jeff Nichols, my name. I have the house that's in these pictures just here beside you, on the other side of the walkway.
So you're just here, Jeff?
No.
That's there.
Oh, just here. Sorry.
That's my house.
Just no one knows it.
A couple of things. First of all, on what's been said already, we did object to the dual occupancy opposite, which had just been mentioned, and everything we mentioned at that objection, I would have to say, has come true.
Yes.
Certainly.
Like we've had rentals, we've got cars out the front, we've got non-stop traffic. I have no idea how many people are staying in there. But there are obviously a lot of people who are around.
Certainly.
Also, I just add to that in my own situation, I have an elderly father who is in there. We have a constant round of carers coming to that house day in and day out. We certainly have 2 or 3 cars a day pulled in.
Sure.
And it's already getting very, very cramped as far as parking on the verge is concerned, and so on. So there is I wouldn't underestimate the traffic flow this is going to generate. I think it will be very, very substantial, and I think that should be looked at. We've had to, when the objection was taken to the dual occupancy opposite, we raised questions about the narrowness of the bend, and I'd have to say that that's still absolutely true. It's a very dangerous corner. And what has happened only in relatively recent times is an unbroken line. It's been put in there for the first time.
Which is heavily enforced as well, isn't it? You pilot with broken lines.
Have you found that that's assisted? Is that working?
But it's very, very recent, so I just think that we're just escalating all the time, and it's very unnerving that this is just going to come on top of that. I think that the other thing, if you go back to your cross-section briefly, please, for a sec. This cross-section here, and this is just really my own vested interest more than anything else, but there's a public walkway which I take it is the bit that's on the level of our house.
That would be that bit there, yeah. And just to step back, you're looking.
That's it, yeah. But I would like to think there would be a bit of vegetation on that other side of the walkway. There has been in the past, but that doesn't look as though it's a big priority in this.
Not necessarily. It's possibly not reflected as well as it could be on that cross section, but yes, there will be vegetation along there.
Do those units have access directly to the public pathway?
I don't think so. That's a good question. Thank you, Rob. No, they don't.
Right. And the other thing too is that I think that just looking at this now and from your other supporting diagrams, it looks as though there will be a good deal of oversight of our house from these. And it seems a pretty ugly facing to me. The facing on the units, if that was an indication.
Yeah,
it's not particularly attractive.
Okay. So there is I think it's 14.5 metres between the face of this side of the building to your block.
To the boundary.
Yeah, so that's a fair distance of 14.5 metres. If overlooking is an issue, we'll definitely take that on board and make sure that we have it fully addressed.
Yeah, I mean the vegetation might fix a lot too.
It will screen it, and there are. I mean, if it is a driving issue, then we can look at directing views away from it as well. So that's a possibility.
Of course, the traffic issues as well. I think everything that's been said is accurate. They must be taken on board.
Last question up the back, the bloke in a red beanie.
That's me. If people are going to age in place there, they'll get to the stage where they are no longer driving cars and are likely to have limited ability to walk. How far is it from there to the nearest shopping centre?
The nearest shopping.
Long way.
To Campbell Shops, it is.
It's pretty steep.
Yeah.
How far is it?
I think it's
It's difficult to get a bus.
it's approximately 2 to 3 kilometres, just off the top of my head.
2 to 3 kilometres.
Yeah, it's not close to shops.
Just one question. Before you close it down, I'd like to ask one
Yeah,
question.
sure, quickly.
Very short, sharp.
Certainly.
What do the buyers buy when they want to buy a unit here? What will they get?
They'll get
A strata title?
They'll get a sublease.
A sublease? What's a sublease?
So the diocese will continue to own the block,
Right.
and it'll be operated under a sublease arrangement. So and that will be for the term of the existing Crown lease. So if you've got a 99-year lease, there would be a sublease that would come in.
So who will manage the corporate
That would be
expenses?
That would be operated by the diocese.
The
Okay.
diocese will run that.
They'll continue to operate.
They'll manage the lawn mowing, the maintenance, and recover that from
Correct.
sub-lessees.
Correct.
Thanks.
Dennis, I'd like one.
Yeah, look, I've got 2 quick questions. And then you may.
Area for photograph, please.
Certainly.
So on the site, no, the next one, this one. So on the site, there's a one big building in the middle.
Correct.
And so
And an empty block.
on the right, there, it looks like a lot of mature trees,
It's an empty block.
and you'll hammer them.
So there will be loss of some trees, but we have walked the site with the ACT government, and we've agreed to put in an offset.
You can't offset a 50-year-old or 100-year-old tree. That was one point. The other point is, what do you do in terms of energy efficiency of your motor store?
Energy efficiency. Rob, would you like to talk to that? Sorry, everybody. Rob Morton from Cox.
I thought it very interesting in terms of the discussion we had earlier about sustainability, and we're looking at this site and a number of sites for the diocese, and I suppose it's about helping the diocese to be good stewards of the land in that context. Well, trees is just one issue, but I'm talking about the central issue of the urban infill, and everyone has an opinion. Naturally, so we've taken the view, and the diocese in this context has taken the view, is that they want to retain it as an investment as stewards of the land. So one of the options that we're going to be considering, I'm just trying to paint some context here, is that they could go for a change of use to the site, pay out a concession charge, and then flog the land to a developer. Now, a developer would rezone the land and take a quite different approach. We've done a number of scenarios here which tested a number of different uses in terms of apartments and those sorts of things. We've got a much higher yield, but our client took the view that they wanted to retain the asset, given the length of time and the trust that the government and the community has in the church as stewards of that land, and to provide a supportive housing model of 8 domestic scale townhouses. Now, we're all, in terms of the architecture and the look and feel, that's a subjective question. Everyone has an opinion there, so I won't get into that issue myself. But that's the central issue here, is that from our perspective, we're trying to propose a development that we feel, in terms of the community perception, provides a balance there, provides the opportunity for local residents or other residents to age in place. It is also in the context of it being we like to call it a 1/2-story development, because the bulk of the development is actually single story, and then we've taken half of the footprint and extruded that footprint. And what that does, if you look at some of the drawings, is it provides the opportunity for views to be maintained through the development to the adjacent open space. Now that hasn't answered the issue about...
So which ones are the single-story ones?
So there's a mixture between them. So these components come up as...
They're single-story only?
No.
Or pretend single-story?
Do you have the elevations?
I don't think we've got the elevations. No. So that's probably the closest we've got. But what you're seeing here, you've got one story there, but you've got these 2-story fins that stick up. So you've actually...
Two-story here?
Okay.
As you walk past, they're going to look like 2-story buildings.
Excuse me, Marianne, last question, please. Marianne.
Did you want to say something, sir? I think you're part of this. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Please go.
Yeah, the offset trees that you mentioned, where are those actually going to be put?
I'll just find...
So they might sort of block the views a bit, please.
So there's a proposed offset planting zone here and here.
So along Fairburn.
Along Fairburn and in the urban open space to the west.
So
Also, the whole...
Would that be in the road reserve you're talking about?
Yes.
And on the vacant lot?
On the urban open space on the other side, yes.
Richard, I'll be quick. You mentioned charcoal concrete, and this is a reference to the Warmwood.
Yes, so...
Which part of the Warmwood?
That's to the sandstone. I know the back bit's
the new bit. So
the new bit's not the Warmwood.
Particularly the cafe component. The new cafe component,
Okay.
which is
because when you say the Warmwood, it's a sandstone building.
It is.
So to me, there's no. You need to be very careful about how you use your words there. That's didn't make any sense to me at all.
That's okay. Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you.
Is there a road in there? Is there a road that goes through between the two lots of buildings?
There's 2 driveways.
2 driveways.
Yes.
So
and they deal with the split level of the site. So that's why they yeah.
So you have a turning circle at the end?
No.
So if they drive in,
people turn into their garage, basically.
they have to reverse out again.
No, they drive into their garage.
Yes, and then they obviously reverse out of their garage somehow.
So the access into the driveway at the moment is up the hill. Will it mean that it'll come down closer to the curb?
So if we go to...
very dangerous.
So we've got an existing access up the hill, and so we're essentially sticking to that, but we will have one further down the hill.
Yes. That'll be closer to the curb, and it'll be extremely dangerous.
So there'll be 2 points of access from Rosendale Street, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
It's on the one in the driveway. Where's the second? They're just next to each other.
They're just next to each other, just here.
So all is going up on the website?
It's already up on the website, yes. And I'll just take you to the. So that's the web. That was helpful. That's the website there. And if you take one of the cards as well, that's got the website on it, just so you don't...
And the information will be up there tomorrow, first thing in the morning, so you can scrutinise the plans there and submit any feedback via their website as well.
Thanks, Lee.
Can I suggest it may well have been good manners and perhaps a little bit of a caring attitude to have actually made some discussion with the people, particularly those living very close to this situation, who are going to feel the impact of this quite significantly.
And that is the process that we're doing at
But
this
you
moment.
finished, you've done everything. There was no consultation with people in the street saying, do you think this would suit? How will it meld in, you know? How will you like it? It's like consultation in council, which is, it's doing a meeting to tell you what we're going to do. It's not saying, not asking anybody for their opinion.
Well, I think a number of really important views and valid views have been raised today, which we will feed into the design.
Perhaps you could come and have a meeting with the people in that part of the street who will feel that.
And effectively, that's what this meeting is about. So I certainly take that on board. But we have approached the community, and we are open to your views, and they will inform where our direction and where we head from here.
But you're not going to change it, are you, really?
Potentially. So, I mean, there was a discussion about overlooking. There was a discussion about overlooking previously. So that is something that we'll look into and take very seriously. The points on traffic impact and traffic safety, that is something that we will take very seriously.
So we have had some consultation. It may not be the consultation everybody wants. However, it is consultation.
And it will continue over the coming weeks. So if anything comes up, if you think of anything over this time, you've got an opportunity to look on the website, take in the information and provide your views.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Have a good one.
Okay. Well, we're going to change the flavour completely now. We welcome Professor Masar Nobi. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Good. To have a quick talk to us, a discussion about urban planning issues in North Canberra. Professor Nobi has studied at the ANU some time ago, has been at the University of Okayama and has returned to Canberra to find out a little bit more. So welcome.
Thank you very much. At present, I'm a lecturer of a Japanese university in Japan, and 30 years ago, I studied at the ANU about urban planning of Canberra. And this city has changed a lot. And I'd like to know what sort of urban issues or urban problems there are at present. If you let me know what sort of problems there are, I would appreciate it very much.
So it's up to you guys. Feedback.
So problems on what?
Urban issues,
well,
urban problems.
I will give you plenty in my presentation. Perhaps I should go first and then you can have a lead on.
Okay. We will have a presentation from the Watson Community Association following this, and we may hear about all sorts of problems and we may not. Okay, does anybody have any particular things about urban planning? And I see a hand up the back.
A really fundamental issue in Canberra is that huge urban developments are being put in place without public transport. You can see that in Gangale, where now for a huge expense the first public transport corridor is being put in. But you see now happening in Moronglo, in new developments, where again people are going to move in and are completely dependent on cars.
Yes.
Miles?
I think the urban planning in Canberra is really good, but it hasn't kept up with the change in society. If you look at it in the 60s, the NCDC led the world. They worked out that you provide the infrastructure first, then you put the people in second. And if you look, when this suburb down was planned in the 60s, it was all about walkable, livable communities, but society has changed and planning hasn't kept up. back in the 60s, each household was lucky to have one car. If they were lucky, the kids kind of went to the local school. Now the kids go all over the place. So the society has changed and planning hasn't kept up with that. But I think we still should be really happy we live where we are. I think it's a great place to live.
Mike?
What brings mind to me is there was a presentation by someone from the ACT government on the climate change strategy, and in that presentation the person was effectively saying, here's what we should have in Canberra, and it seemed to be talking about having extra green space and not having too much concrete and all that. And to me, that was almost completely the opposite of what the planning people were promoting. It was as if they don't talk to each other. And I found it rather odd that they have a strategy that says we're supposed to do this, but the agency that effectively is responsible for managing that, they obviously haven't been talking to each other. And I think on that presentation about the, the development, I was even thinking about that dual occupancy. I thought, that's a perfect example because it's just been completely concreted over. And the houses there looked like they were, well, each one looked like double the size of the one that was across the street. So effectively, instead of having any green space, you just have a bunch of gray space. And it seems like this part of the ACT government wants more green space, but this side wants more gray space. And they're the ones who make the rules. So that's my issue.
I think there are two issues I'd like to raise. One is the physical size of Canberra, the distances we have to travel. We have an area a third the size of London for a population about a 20th the size of London. That means, for example, that the average Canberra bus stop has about 1,000 people living within walking distance of it, 400 metres. The average bus stop in Amsterdam has about 10,000 people living within walking distance of it. So basically that means you can run 10 times as many bus services just as cost effectively in Amsterdam, as in Copenhagen, sorry, as you can here. 25% of trips in the Netherlands are done by bicycle. The average bicycle commute in the Netherlands is 4.4 kilometres. Here, the average bicycle commute distance is over 10 kilometres, so it's only super fit people who bother riding bikes to work, and we only get 3% of trips to work by bicycle. And this is an example of what Niall said. When I moved in here, there was a big school next door, there was a shopping centre here, doctors, things like that. The government closed down the school. There was a service station even up there in the 80s. The government closed down the school. That meant that the customers were no longer coming to the shops twice a day. For the last 15 years, we've had no shops at all in this suburb. Anybody who wants to go to school or go to shops has to go outside the suburb and travel that extra distance. So distance is a major problem. The other problem is complexity of the territory plan. That last presentation we saw was about putting supportive housing on a block in the community facilities zone. Now, the community facilities zone development table says that, I think it says that you can put supportive housing on it. But that doesn't mean you can, because that can be overridden by any district precinct map as of 2012. So that can say, well, you can't have supportive housing on this site. And that can be overridden, or contradicted at least, by any suburb precinct map. And there is a suburb precinct map for Campbell. And so just to know what you are allowed to build, what type of thing you're allowed to build on a site, you have to find the development table for your zone. Then you have to identify which district precinct map applies and check that. And then you have to identify the suburb precinct map that applies, unless you're outside the urban area. And then you have to check all the other possible precinct maps, just in case they change the provisions. And that's just one example of the complexity of the plan.
You finish it. Miles?
I think the other thing that's happened in the last 30 years is a governance issue. The NCDC ruled with an iron fist, and it was the number one. It told all the other governments, agencies what to do. So planning was the dominant agency in Canberra, the NCDC. Now, ACLA, with self-government, ACLA is third in line in making the planning decisions. You have the real estate arm, that was EDE or LDA. They were first, and then Treasury. How much money did the Greenfields contribute to the coffers? And third in line in planning decisions is ACLA, or whatever the acronym they're called now. But the planning authority is basically being stripped of resources. It's a bit of a planning-free zone. They haven't actually got many planners in there to work there. And so it's a governance issue that is a result of self-government, and the government has to fund itself by selling off land greenfields development.
Is that enough? I think you've got enough there.
Marianne?
Marianne? Right. Where do I start?
Excuse me while I leave.
Yeah, Lee will go back tomorrow.
Right.
Yes.
A couple of things. What people have just mentioned here is I would definitely reinforce. There seems to be little integration with the various agencies.
Yes.
I live in Reed. I'm president of the Reed Residents Association.
Yes.
At the moment, I am still waiting for a response to a letter that was sent on a multiple series of issues in terms of parking, heritage requirements that are mandated in the Reed housing precinct, and a whole range of other issues where there have been breaches of what we understand as the mandatory requirements, and it's going out to a whole series of agencies, and there seems to be very little understanding. I would actually go to say that it looks to me as though there is a lack of expertise in some of the agencies. They do not know what the rules and the legislation say. I find that's a very difficult thing to have to levy at government, because I am an ex-government servant myself, but not in this jurisdiction. And I find it's embarrassing to have to say that. I do find that there's a lack of whole of government or joined up government processes in this particular jurisdiction, and I think that's actually inexcusable. In terms of heritage, I've got heritage issues on one hand, but they can be rolled out all through the inner north, because there's a whole range of very, very wonderful buildings built by architects that are dotted all the way through the inner north. There's not just the ancient precinct, or ancient in Canberra terms, of the 1920s of Reed, but there's other modernist buildings that are going to be rumbled because, you know, there's a bigger...
What do you mean by rumbled?
Oh, knocked down.
Oh, yeah.
Knocked down. Sorry, I shouldn't use colloquialism. So that's an issue too, because we have wonderful modernist buildings here, and they should be made a tourist feature. But there seems to be a lack of vision for the future of maintaining those. There also seems to be a lack of consistency in terms of rolling out what greening space or green space we need for climate change. And so we're putting more and more tar and cement right through the inner areas of Canberra, and not remembering that we're meant to be a garden city. And I think that is also an issue. So that there seems to be, as somebody alluded before, there's a mismatch between what the government, I think it was you, Jochen, is doing on one hand, and what it implements as policy on the other. And the two things do not sit side by side. There's a lack of consistency.
Yes.
Okay? That's enough. You can, Dennis has come back in.
I only went to the toilet.
So. Too much information.
Yes. Do you have a lot of information?
Yes, thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Professor.
Thank you very much.
What is the project? What is the project you are here working on now? What is your project now at the ANU? What's your research project?
Urban planning. This is a planned city, and I conducted a survey about personal networks of people, and I was interested in the effect of planned city upon personal networks of residents.
How long will you be
relationships.
there? How long will you be there? How long will you be at the ANU?
At the ANU, 5 years.
5 years, good.
But 5 years ago.
No, now.
Now, this time only for 3 months.
Oh. No time for networks.
No.
So maybe the professor will return and tell us what he's found out. You're welcome back to
thank you very
tell
much.
us about.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay. Watson. What's on in What's On?
Okay, well, I'm Gillian Hellier and I'm the Secretary of the Watson Community Association, and it's all about planning, really. What happened was that we have the old suburb here, for those of you who aren't terribly familiar with Watson. You can see here the shops of the purple area. I'm sorry I haven't got it on a thing, but it was a fairly late presentation idea. And coming out from the school and the oval here, there are these green spaces here and lots of walkways and streets. And this is the power line going across, and this is North Watson. Now, what's happened in North Watson, which is the area that I live, is that we've had ad hoc development, and every time something comes up like this happening in Campbell, we have this argument and this great sort of discussion and all of these things and so on. And so he said, well, let's find out if we have a master plan for Watson. Of course, there was a master plan for Watson virtually, but it only included this area here. And about 2007, building was starting to happen over here, but it still hadn't been incorporated as a whole suburb into another plan. What we did, we started agitating about this last year and fronting up to Andrew Barr and saying, you know, how do we do this? And eventually, I think that big meeting that he had prior to the election over at Lynham, I said, well, look, if you know, when you get in, how would you go about it if I had a problem like this, dealing with the government? And he said, well, as soon as the government gets in, write to the planning minister and the other things and ask to have a meeting. Anyway, what happened after that was that when we sent a letter saying that we'd published the results of the fact that we hadn't received proper responses from the government to our requests for a master plan, we got a phone call from the Chief Minister's office saying that there was somebody who is now there who was a liaison between the community groups and they set up a meeting with us, with the planning department. So what we did was we presented this kind of information that we've got, say here, these are the units on this is the federal highway here. This whole block is 5 little sections, but there are no walkways through. So if somebody lives here and they want to get a bus, which is around here, they've got to walk all the way around. They can't get through here. Solstice is a bit better. It's got its own little precinct development, and the fair and this area here. But what's happening at the moment is that these are the 3 areas that are being developed at the moment. This one's under construction at the moment. Negus Crescent is going through. But there is no requirement for each of those developers to talk to each other or to make any links between each other. And so what's going to happen is we expect it'll end up like this, except worse. You know, and the whole area will be like that. So when we had the meeting, and the other thing that's prompted some action that we've had was that the Academy of Interactive Entertainment, which is over here in the old Watson High School, wants to put in student accommodation here in conjunction with the Catholic University, and want to know what sort of community payback, if you like, things that we'd want in the area. So we thought we'd try to collect some information. So when we went to and had the meeting with the planning department, we got a reasonably unsatisfactory response again, because it seemed like there really was no overview of the whole suburb, and there didn't intend to be. And I don't think that they really understood what was happening. They didn't really understand that it was just getting chewed up and not being planned as the old suburb was. So we decided to conduct a survey, and we of Watson residents only, and so we set up a very simple thing that we asked just 10 questions. What we did was we advertised it in our newsletter that we deliver every 3 months, and we had it online, and we had some hard copies as well, so that we have about 2,500 newsletters that we deliver, so that's about the number of households and businesses. We got exactly 248 responses, which we thought was not bad really, because we didn't, we only ran it for a month, and we didn't do any other advertising. We sat over at the shop sometimes, and we sat at the preschool fair. But most of the responses were online. So we thought that 248 wasn't bad. We thought that it probably was reasonably representative, because we didn't make any attempt to select people from anywhere. And the only demographic we asked, though, was did they live in North Watson, this area here, or over here, in the older part of Watson. So I'll just tell you the questions that we asked, and then I'll give you a little bit of a wrap-up of what we got. What community facilities are most needed or desirable for Watson? We gave them about 10 choices, but they could also add other, so anything that they wanted. Then we had a few rating questions. How important is it that Watson has safe and convenient pedestrian bike pathways linking all residents, including North Watson, to public transport, bus and light rail, and public amenities, schools, shops, etc.? Perhaps I should give you the results as I'm going through. It might make more sense that way. What we found with the first one, some of the choices that we gave them, this was public toilets located near the shops. We don't have any in Watson. This is parkland, trees and open grassland. This is community vegetable garden, more car parking, and this is the community facilities that were desired. This is public landscape, community hall, improved community something or other, more picnic tables, and sporting facilities. So there was a bit of a range. I can't go into the actual responses for all the comments at the moment, because they came at the end. So this is the response that we got for people wanting safe pathways going through the suburb. What a very high response. So people really value that. What we got was we had 2/3 responses came from the older part of Watson, and 1/3 came from the newer part of Watson. Now the population in North Watson is nearly the same as in the older part of the suburb now. So that gives you an idea of how the housing development is occurring.
So could you just repeat that presentation, the ratio of those numbers there?
The responses that we got were about 2/3 from this part and 1/3 from this part. So I'm not really going to try and interpret that, but there are almost as many people living over in this area as there are over here. We know that.
Are there a different?
Or households, sorry, households.
Is there a different differential in the number of rentals between the two parts of Watson?
Yes, there'll be a lot more rentals over here.
They don't care.
That's right.
Yeah. However, one of the things that we noticed was how enthusiastic people were to fill it out. When we actually approached them at the shop, and we told them what we're doing, showed them the map. Oh yes, I'll fill that out. You know, it was even people who were living in the very poor housing commission places near the shops. Some of them filled it out. So it was quite interesting to see how enthusiastic people felt about planning, actually. So that was the. Now, the next question was a little bit the same as the one before. How useful would it be to have a high-quality pedestrian bike access extending from the extreme part of North Watson over to Downer? In other words, Downer is now fairly dependent on the schooling at Watson. And, but there's no easy access for the kids, really. I mean, they can get through, but there's not a high-quality pedestrian cycle access. And even with that, people were rating that very highly. Even people who didn't probably cycle or walk very much. Although I do think people do actually in Watson do that a lot. So this one here was interesting. There's a proposal to establish student accommodation at Canberra Technology Park, the old Watson High School, to service Watson tertiary institutions. What other accommodation do you think would be an asset in this area? And what we did was we had supported housing for disadvantaged or disabled or older people here. Luxury units, very short. This is freestanding houses, a residential, a retirement village, sorry, a mix of the above, none, or other. So in fact, a lot of people felt that a mix of other things might be okay, and not very many people said they didn't want some more housing close to the shops. So that was a bit interesting. And the other things, then the next one we asked was, as part of the redevelopment, what other facilities are also being considered? What do you think would most improve that area? Mostly these were things like outdoor parkland, outdoor recreation areas, children's play areas, parkland, landscape garden, dog park, very little bit for accommodation. That wasn't terribly surprising. How important do you think it is to include public open green space with trees and pathways, similar to that in the existing areas of the older part of Watson, as part of the developments in North Watson? And this is what came with that, you know. Everybody almost said it's very important, even though it's not happening. What activities or facilities would you like to see supported in Watson's green spaces? And so, again, this highest rating was for pedestrian and cycle walkways through the green spaces. Next thing was children's play areas, wildlife corridors. So people are very enthusiastic about the things that are not being designed in. What specific aspects of Watson do you currently like or dislike? Now we had about 400 or 500 comments that we had to go through, because we asked that question, and then the last question was, I won't go into a great deal with this, but do you have any further comments, things that you would like to see developed in Watson not previously covered in the survey? So one of the things that came out quite strongly was that people understood that if you live over here, you're unlikely to walk over here to the shops. That was what came out about the Campbell thing too. And what I found was that a lot of people who lived in this area here didn't actually know there was a little cycle path in through here. And so they didn't actually think of that as a route to get to the shops. They would only think about using the road, because there isn't an integrated pathway system through this way. So the other thing that we found when we were at the shops was that sometimes nearly half the people who came didn't come from Watson, to the Watson shops. There were lots of people from Downer, of course, but there were also people from Ainslie. They said it was easier to park there and so on. So it was quite surprising to us how many people were actually shopping at the shop. This wasn't to do with the Knox, as you know, is a very popular cafe. many of those people have come from out of the suburb, but it obviously concerns a lot of people. And a number of people from Ainslie and Downer wanted to actually fill out the survey. But we realised, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you here was that we realised that it does have a considerable impact on the neighbouring suburbs about what happens in the suburb next door. We thought there might be an opportunity to work with the Downer Association at some stage to see whether there might be something that could link in and support that. Our challenge now, there might be a few questions that you have, but our challenge now is to use that information to go back and say, look, you know, you've got to do something right now. I didn't point out actually that these are still spaces that are not under development application. You know, these ones, they haven't, the land's being sold off here. The land's being sold off here, and there's a new thing that's just been put through, and this one is going to be a precinct. They're thinking about putting a shop or a cafe or something in there, but essentially there's really no plan for any community facilities over this way.
Why would they? Communities facilities don't pay anything for that?
No.
I remember there used to be that Heritage Park, whatever, with all the shops, yeah, and with the Clancy's and all the other stuff.
Yes.
And I remember,
yes.
you know, thinking at the time, because they were going to be building, and I just thought,
Yeah.
well, if you're going to be building, you obviously need to have shops.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in a way, that northern actually
That's
looks
right.
like a separate suburb.
You can see that it would have been useful.
Yeah, yeah, and I just
and
never.
you could have had residential part as part of that. Yes, we objected to that at the time and said, look, this is right.
So
Numbers of people
Yes,
said they wanted a pub, you
Yeah.
know, and they wanted somewhere where they could watch the kids play when they were having a drink or, you know, having coffee or something like that. That would have been perfect.
Because the buildings were perfect. I remember
No,
going
no.
there, and it was like looked like a nice set of shops. There was a pub with a nice fire. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just. I guess you're thinking about, you know, the totality of if you want a suburb, you can't have just houses
Yeah.
or just flats. You've got to have something for people to
Yeah.
you know, come together. And I'm just really disappointed because even if you look at Watson now,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Yes,
And-
it's huge, and there's no, you know, lots of people
Yeah.
said, well, you know, these facilities are just too small now for the
Yeah.
whole lot. So, and as I said, there are almost as many households here. There will be as soon as that's built as over here. So,
Okay.
how can we use this information best? Ed?
I was just going to say, have you got an appointment, or is it?
Not
did you
yet.
say there was something about getting into the planning? Because I mean, I know that North Watson area. Well, it was never originally part of the suburb. I
No.
presume that's why it's all these blocks were.
That's why the plan only comes up here.
Was it tourism or accommodation or something that they're looking at rezoning and you know, land's money now. If they can build on it, they'll build on it. And the fact that all these little sections have just been sort of hived off or sold off in such an ad hoc manner, and I know what you mean about, I don't know what the residential townhouse things there on Holston Lane is called, but it's such a rabbit warren of little places, and the fare is the same. There's sort of no off-street parking for cars or anything. It's so
Well, we know this, but how do we actually use this
How do we-
information best to try to recover the little bit of
Yes.
space that we've got left?
That's right. That's
If
right.
anybody's got more ideas, come and see me afterwards. Because we're just about to hold a meeting of people now to work out how we we haven't got a meeting yet, but we need to have, we've got we've done some analysis, we've got some things, and now we're ready to have a meeting to work out what to do with government.
Miles?
I just, on behalf of the DCA, would love to work with you guys. And the majority of our kids do go to school at Jura, so they cross Phillip Avenue every day. So we'd be very interested in like the main routes to the school and stuff like that, and kind of working with you guys. But Watson, you did say the Watson Woodland, so that's a big tick for you guys.
Yeah.
But they are still, like, it's amazing all that and the blocks along Federal Highway, they're proposing stuff along there too, aren't they? Mixed
Well,
review.
yeah, these ones will eventually come up.
Yeah.
But it's this problem really of ad hoc development.
Yeah.
What we can see here is we can see in a planned city, we have a lovely plan here.
Yeah.
And but when some space comes up, and I don't know whether this has happened very much in other suburbs in Canberra, but because this is a little bit special, there's not many older suburbs that have all of this space that just gets chewed up, and it's almost like it's a backwater, you know. It's not seen as important at all.
Up the back.
See, NCCC have been involved in a lot of these developments, especially the fair at the time.
Yes.
And there are a number of issues: the closeness to the nature reserve, hard edge development, traffic, and so on and so on. The biggest problem is that everybody who is interested in that area, except us, is only interested to flog it off at the highest possible price and then put stuff in as densely as you can in order to recover your money.
Yeah, we know that.
And
but
that is really
only
tricky to crack unless you are able to confront the government with a certain kind of livable city or sustainable city talk, and then say, right, let's look at this here and see how that plays out in reality. And we want now to talk about this. See, we had discussions about neighborhood planning and so on and so on. That all went down the drain because it's too complicated for government to actually implement some of these community concerns.
Yes, yes. I mean, we know that the government is the only avenue that we can get some action through, because development, some of the developers are, I mean, I'm not saying all developers are bad, but a developer is only interested in the development that they're doing. They can't be thinking that this is going to be the biggest thing for the whole suburb.
The government's job is to actually control.
Yes.
Can I put in a
what
comment?
the planning's meant to be about.
Quickly, because we're winding this one up.
My comment is at the end of the day, there's not just a supply side to the equation, there's the demand side. You've already told me that a whole bunch of these units are rented, so therefore there is investors that are prepared to buy this. Now, personally, as an investor in houses, I would see it as a rubbish development. There's no way I would buy a place there. I've been to there. I went to the auction. I argued with them about Nancy's. I stood in the middle of when they were doing the presentation, and I told them, I thought in front of the whole audience there in a big tent for the place was a load of rubbish. And it is a load of rubbish. And there's no
We're not disputing that, we're just looking at what we can do now.
I know that. What I'm saying is that if the investors stop buying this, then the developers wouldn't do it. So how can you get that? It's just it's a sort of a point. How can you make it clear that investors that buy this are not really going to, they're not going to get the yield that they might otherwise do. If they do
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Gillian. This is a small part of a series of talks that we'll have from all of our suburbs, not at the same time, over the next few months. Okay.
Thank you.
That was fantastic.
Thank you. I have some jumbled thing that says declaration of potential conflicts of interest. Does anybody have any conflicts of interest?
What, committee members?
Pardon?
Committee members.
Too many members. Yeah, committee members. Oh, committee members. No conflicts of interest?
I mean, my conflict of interest has been raised as a
Well, I don't have any conflicts of interest, so.
Item 6 in the agenda just simply is talking about the potential committee conflicts of interest. And there it's in the agenda. I don't know that there's any need to go any further.
Okay. I haven't been notified of any new members this month, so nobody wins the prize for the most new members.
Was there even a prize?
Okay, just quickly, we have circulated with the notice was minutes of the previous meeting and other recent meetings which we hadn't sent out the minutes for. I hope somebody's had a look at them and is going to say we approve them.
I'll move that we approve them.
And John's going to second it.
I'll second it.
Yes. And we all vote in favour?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
It is democracy at its best.
Yes. Okay, some reports. And Marianne has a report on the symposium she attended recently on bushfire management and balancing risks, and I hope you can wind it up in 3.5 moments.
I'll try to. I was very impressed. I went to the Saturday, it was actually a Friday, Saturday and half day Sunday. Bushfire management, looking at getting the balance right. And I was impressed with a couple of things. I was impressed with the nuanced way that people do conduct controlled burning these days. They don't just light a line of fire, they're tending to do mosaic burning at the right season, the right conditions, etc. There seems to be much more knowledge sharing. There seems to be a much greater intention to be working with community. Now that implies too that a lot of the responsibility to make yourselves safe will devolve onto you as well. There is a map here that I'll just quickly show you that shows you that most of North Canberra is lies within an ember drop zone. And this is about the best I can get onto it to actually show. So from where you're sitting there, you will see a yellow perimeter. Now, luckily, I don't live very close to that lemon-coloured perimeter, but there would be houses that are built all the way along that ember drop area. Now, certainly most of the prevailing winds do come from the west, not from the east. So basically, this side is relatively safe. But it does behove everybody to be very aware in the bushfire season. Climate change is making the intense weather patterns that we're getting these days more and more accentuated, and that was made very plain by one of the professors who attended that meeting. I was also incredibly impressed with the Aranda Woodlands and how they managed that extremely well, using cultural bushfire practices with the Aboriginal group that work in that particular fire management area. And they also make a big effort to try and protect some of the very precious ground orchids there. So I was really, really pleased with the amount of time I spent there. My recommendation would be strongly that we get the community fire units, and I think, Mike, you know quite a bit about those, in. I think there are gaps in the perimeter around this ember drop zone, and I did make that point in a submission I made a couple of years ago. I think it'd be really good if we actually convened a public meeting and got involved the community fire units and also some of the people who presented perhaps at that seminar. It was good value. I know that if we end up with a firestorm, there's not much we can do about it, but certainly a lot of the preliminary material and the knowledge that's being passed from various community groups, plus the professional fire people and the research that's going on seems to be working, which it hasn't always in the past. So I will leave that with you to think about, and I certainly my recommendation would be to try and convene a public meeting, possibly in November, concentrating on fire management, which also includes building codes, of course. That's it.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, I don't think anything's changed over the last couple of years. I don't know if anyone from Watson or Hackett or Ainsley can, update. It's just that so far, I'm in O'Connor, and we have community fire units along the edge, but it's always been a problem on the other side that there aren't any community fire units. And we did have, I can't remember who it was, someone was saying they did try and just didn't get the interest. So I think one of the issues there is actually getting interest from people who are in the area, to actually form them, because actually it's a good thing to know. So,
very, very handy as a sort of a member of how they design it. It's very handy to get knowledge to have on how this actually works.
Yeah.
There's a sort of underlying infrastructure and engineering and mechanics of how you tap into the street water to start with, how you roll the hoses out, and then how you fight a fire. And I would put it to that anyone who hasn't really actually been out on a number of these training courses has got no eye.
You also get free boots and stuff like that.
Okay, the Treasurer, please, sir.
Look, I'll give a usual sort of report. We started with some $8,807. We had expenses, and this is in the last period since my previous report. We had 2 lots of rent go out to Downer Community, this place here. That was $100 times 2, so there's 200 out. We had a cheque to Marcus for what was some sort of IT something or other. This what you can see in front of it, at least we can see we've got something for our money.
It works well, Mark. Fantastic.
We had, well, I'll bring it, sadly it brings me to my next point. There was $409 I put out to a committee member for a fee column, but I cannot see any such fee column. And it would be handy, for the committee to be able to see.
Questions will be asked.
And they will be answered.
Trolley, there was so much noise behind me.
Yes.
Trolley is in office works, ready to be picked up. I will need somebody probably with a Allen key to put it all together. Because they arrived this morning at 10:30 and I'm afraid I've been too busy to pick it up. And I certainly can't, don't have the NAS to be able to put it together.
We'll figure that out.
It's lovely.
There was a training course for Mike on leadership, so we're going to see some. Some money went to Fairfax for an ad, James not here to explain that, and some money went to Jane for printing. We had $750, I'm pleased to say, went to Lynon Community Association, which funded their lovely, what was it, Lantern Walk, and that was really well attended by people in Lynon and surrounds.
And so we're getting a report on that, are we?
Well, that's up to Lynon to do that.
Well, we need to know what happened and what the communication was.
Lynon will have to do that. I went.
What was it like, John?
Fantastic.
I'm not interested in what it was like. I'm interested in knowing what the people want to tell us about government issues. That's what I want to know.
I'll jump in there and just say that I did attend. There were over 500 people. It was a brilliant, brilliant thing. 2 MLAs attended. Elizabeth Lee and Shane Rattenbury. Both of them got earfuls from people. So we fulfilled our brief of informing the government of the thing. It was unfortunate that the day they chose for it, neither the Chief Minister or whatever her name is, Rachel Stephen-Smith, could attend because it was Labor Party conference day and they were otherwise engaged. These things happen. If they'd known there were 500 people there, they might well have ditched conference, but anyway.
So we need to go to Elizabeth Lee and Shane Rattenbury to find out what the issues were that they
Possibly. I don't know if we do. But if someone wants to do that. But that's the basics of my report. That's the only thing I did this last month apart from chase rabbits down holes and whatever. Okay. So that's the Chair's report. You finished your report?
No, not quite.
Inserted inside the trip.
Apart from the 73 cents interest, we had the $200 repayment of the key deposit from the previous landlord, so that's nice to be able to tick that one off. We had a couple of errors that occurred in overpayments. one to Marcus at $19.66, which he insisted on paying that, and I thought it wasn't worth it. The six-pack it would have been tailed. And, but on the other hand, there was also a somewhat embarrassing $191 overrate payment to me that was actually meant to go to Marianne. And I'm going to blame it on my computer, and I put in a multiple payment through the Westpac bank system. It paid different people different amounts of money, and it interchanged our money, Marianne and my money, in my favour. So that $191.26 has been paid to the Canberra Community Council, and it's also been paid out to you. We now have about some $5,600 $5,850 remaining in our accounts, which is starting to look perilously low, which brings us to the point of the grant, which doesn't seem to
It's perilously high, actually, but we won't go into that. We'll do that.
We won't go into that, but by historic standards, the North Canberra Community Council's often been some $20,000 or $30,000. It does seem that way to be. That concludes the report.
Thank you, John. And I've completed my report. And just quickly, Alan from Turner wants to give a quick report. Have you got anything, Miles?
No.
No. Alan is.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, I'm Alan Neat from the Turner Residence. I just wanted to give an update. I think last year was, Neil Parsons in particular spoke about a particular house being constructed in David Street in Turner, right basically on the border with O'Connor. And that house, the built form is about 1,200 square metres, so it's almost 50% more than the plot ratio allows. And we've been fighting a battle with the Planning Authority and lobbying the government for over 2 years now. The Planning Authority admitted that it contravenes the territory plan, the approved plans and conditions of approval. But for people that saw the media earlier this year about some other houses across the ACT that are in the same situation, it's certainly not alone. And what did probably shock us initially, but we realised that's just how it is. The Planning Authority will not take any action to stop it. They've refused point blank to do anything. What they say is that it can't get a certificate of occupancy until it complies, but they said the extra room that's being built, which tips it over the limit, will just simply have to be blocked off on the day that the certificate was issued. For 5 minutes. So with the publicity that was in the media earlier this year, we managed, with some help from John Lieber and another O'Connor resident whose name I didn't bring, to lobby Carolyn Lacutia, who's the Greens planning spokesperson. So she's kindly arranged to take this up and to try to obtain some more publicity. But I think a bit like us, it's sort of banging your head against a brick wall. And I think it's not a precedent because it's happening across the ACT where literally no rules apply during the construction phase.
How much corruption is involved in that?
Well, I think I've got no idea, but I think it's more no one cares. I think that's the simple issue. We had a meeting with the Planning Authority in July last year, which followed on from a letter we wrote to the Planning Minister with a whole list of issues around that dwelling, and we've never received a reply. They haven't bothered to reply. There are other issues in Turner, but I won't go on too long, but one probably worth mentioning, people would be annoyed if I didn't say, from the Residents Committee, there's a boarding house in Haggard Gardens, which the Planning Authority had a win over. They actually had a Supreme Court case where the lease was resumed. Residents noticed when it was being built that it had 8 bathrooms. Now apparently the Planning Authority doesn't question why anyone would want 8 bathrooms in the house. Similar to this house in David Street, the 1,200 square metre house, there's 175 of the garage, but anything labelled on a plan as a garage doesn't count as part of the floor area. The Planning Authority simply said, we can't ask questions about that. The 8 bathroom house was clearly designed as a boarding house. And so I don't remember the precise details of what happened in the court case, but essentially the Planning Authority won, and they got a condition put on the lease that it could not be sublet. So it had to have just one lease. However, residents have noticed and reported to the Planning Authority that there are often signs in the window saying room to rent. The Planning Authority will not take any action. Not despite that they won the court case, they simply have stopped doing it. We just don't know why that is. But I think it comes from the government. I don't think the government cares.
Has anyone in the Federal Residents Association sought a lease in this house to occupy it? It seems like a really easy ASIO-esque kind of opportunity.
Oh, well, maybe, maybe someone's, maybe if anyone has a student at ANU, they could try to infiltrate.
I may know someone.
Sorry, you're there for 3 months, right? You can help.
So look, hopefully Carolyn will be able to get some traction on this. But it really is just, it really is like we've been hitting a brick wall for almost 2 years now. We're trying to get the government or the planning authority to actually do anything. That happens right under their nose, and for whatever reason they're not interested in taking any action. And of course, this could happen anywhere in the ACT.
Have you tried the CT, the Canberra Times?
Well, no, we haven't. I've got a particular problem in that I work in housing in the Commonwealth government, and under our, particularly they've recently tightened the rules. If you like something on Facebook, you threaten dismissal. So it's a bit difficult.
I was just going to say about the media, we did something similar for this monstrosity in O'Connor, which was at about the same time as another monstrosity in Deakin was being built, and that was the head of the ACT Public Service, I think. And yeah, they completely ignored the rules, and but there was an expose done both in the Canberra Times and the ABC. Now, I don't know what happened to the reporter, but the reporter for the ABC was subsequently moved to Sydney. She was basically forced. I mean, it's part of it's who says what, who says what to whom. But I think part of the problem is that even on the media now, is that they're intimidated from actually reporting. And part of it with the Canberra Times is because you can see that their revenue is going down. They got to try and keep up. They're kind of worried about getting the drip feed from government. So, I mean, there is one side that might want to do something, but then you also have to be aware that there might be people just saying, oh, well, we don't want to take the risk. And I thought it was ironic that with the ABC that that happened, but it did. So, there's obviously...
I'll just follow on from that. Like, unless we get some publicity, I've been in lengthy discussions with Carolyn Clear's office about this. Unless we get some publicity, it's probably going to go nowhere. But it is clearly they are building a block of flats at 74 David Street with a big blank plywood wall up in front, which somebody occasionally knocks holes into, or it seems just a keyhole centre here. And so I would suggest you go along and just rip the board off and just have a good look yourself. But we need publicity. And I think, Alan, you've got to decide whether you value where you live. If they're going to sack you over that, well, I mean, what can you do? I just think you need some guts. You need to get out there, right? And I try to...
Okay, I hesitate to encourage revolution in my current position. Okay.
Can I say something on other business? I sent you all an email, showed that 125 Lawana Street got rejected in this development application, and it got soundly rejected. And one of those included they didn't have enough parking and too many units, and the car park was dysfunctional. So they did a resubmission 2 weeks after that, and then the visitor parking to an arrow over to Fennel Hall car park. The ANU, that was their way to... So, this is the cheek of some people. They think they can put the visitor parking on other people's land.
Aren't they going to redevelop that anyway?
Yes, they are. So, anyway.
Which street is that?
Anything you can do that on someone else's property. Anyway.
Okay.
That's like when people say there's not enough private outdoor space for a unit, they say there's a park down the road, around the corner.
And have we moved on to other business? Because I haven't given my report on Reed yet. That's all right.
No, it was Braddon, Reed.
Yes, that was
We're doing a very funny circle, but you are now quickly to report.
Indeed. Right, about 4 points. As you may have noticed in the Canberra Times and the ABC news yesterday and today, the University of New South Wales is going to cohabit in a rather profound way with the CIT in Reed, and as the Reed residents are going to be very interested in this development, and we have been invited to speak with the rector. That's his name. He's a professor of electrical engineering. I'm not quite sure how interested he is in heritage, but we'll endeavour to make sure that he is extremely interested in heritage. Geocom have bought at a huge amount of money the bigger flats, and no doubt it's interesting to notice that the yield that's now progressed from 350 to something like 500, I think, flats there. So basically along Kooyong Street, and of course the bigger flats are back onto Balambir and Cogra Lane in Reed, we're going to have what I termed a couple of years ago in a submission on this whole issue, the Great Wall of Canberra. And unfortunately, again, this does not look to me as though it's an integrated and sympathetic development. Again, somebody mentioned earlier in the night that this planning, we are supposed to be a planned city, but they're all doing their own thing, basically. And I find that reprehensible, because it could have been done. I'm not saying they all have to look alike, but they could be, as the wonderful architectural word that's used in a technical sense here, they could have been sympathetic. The senior manager from Access Canberra rang me on the 2nd of August to apologise for the fact that the letters that we wrote to them, we did an omnibus letter about all the issues that we've had in Reed in terms of planning and compliance, let alone enforcement of compliance, or both of them, sorry, they're synonymous. Promised me that letters would follow up the conversation, tried to indicate to me that things had gone into various agencies for a response, but poor man, I feel sorry for him. He was trying to ringmaster the letter, and so far there's no actual written response. In relation to what I'm hearing Alan say, the issue is compliance. The issue is the fact that I think the technical term for the way Access Canberra looks at things is risk of harm. So if in fact there is no risk of harm, they don't really get bothered about it. So planning regulations, to me, in this wonderful city of ours, do seem to be being trodden all over, and they're not going anywhere. They really, it's a rapid response, turn of the dollar, and I think it's a great pity because Canberra was way ahead. It led light years in its inception and then its implementation. And in the last 20 years, it would seem that that's all gone by the by. And I think that's a deplorable situation. And I think it could be fixed, but I think the capacity of the government needs to be shored up, and I think that the residents need to make sure that the government knows that we do want enforcement, we do want compliance, and we do want better planning outcomes, so that we have amenity in Watson, that we have an understanding of what heritage means, and that if something is mandated, it should be mandated. There's a very plain English definition of mandate, and that when something is mandated, that is to the letter of the law. And these sorts of things do not seem to be working. That's my report on Reed, and who knows where we're going to go with you and the University of New South Wales and Geocom and JW Land, and so it goes with the Great Wall of Canberra.
Are we in other business?
Yes, no,
we will be in a few moments. We've done any other reports. We're on to general business.
I'll just make a brief note about O'Connor.
Oh, sorry, I forgot them. Quick.
I'll take it as a non-conspiracy. Anyway, briefly this morning, we had Rachel Stephen-Smith and Megan Fitzharris come up and do a bit of an opening in the Baseball Tucker Hall, or Horseback Park as it might be called, a long time ago by the locals, where it's been landscaped in a bush setting. So it's got a lot of native grasses, Bermudas, herbaceous. I can't pronounce that one correctly, microlita grasses and a variety of local native species have been planted through there as an alternative to a high maintenance mode grassland park. And that opening occurred this morning, so I encourage anyone who wants to go to the park that sits between Miller Street and the Co-op School and amongst the Taken Walls to go and have a look at what you can actually do. So that opening occurred, that little powwow already occurred this morning.
Did they come here and give a presentation on it, or not?
I can't.
Yeah, they did, but they did do one at Mark last year though, at the Christmas event.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it's nice to hear some good news. We got a park, and it's been refurbished.
A vast improvement, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, right. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that it is actually 9:45 and we try and finish by 9:30. I have failed today. Okay, position of secretary. Does anybody have anything of note except that we don't have one?
Yeah, I can give an update.
Yeah.
I resigned as secretary so that I could try and persuade the government to correct the incorrect statements it's made about Technical Amendment 2012-06. I've just had a letter published in the City News saying that in relation to this statement that that technical amendment merely relocated provisions within the territory plan, the Chief Minister's Department has evaluated that statement. It didn't bother to confirm the meaning of the word merely or to consider the impact of that on the rest of the statement, concluded that it was an unremarkable summary of the technical amendment, and has threatened me with further action if I should publicly repeat unwarranted allegations of misleading comments against any official in relation to this matter.
Sorry, could you say that a bit louder? Sorry, I'm just...
You're being recorded.
That's all right. It's in the City News.
Well, back to the position of secretary. At our last committee meeting, we did discuss that since we've had trouble finding a secretary, we were intending to offer to pay someone $100 per month to perform the duties of secretary. So if anyone is interested in writing up minutes and agendas and circulating that to members and dealing with correspondence, which no one has stepped up to the plate to do, we're currently offering $100 a month for that.
And currently on the committee.
Yes. I think it'd be a good idea, Dennis, to circulate that to all membership in an email,
sure,
so that people have an idea.
And we have no volunteers for secretary?
Volunteers or paid volunteers, in a sense.
Or anyone paid services. Does anybody have any other comments on it? I think Marianne's been doing a great job.
Well,
wow.
Just a curiosity question, Miriam. Are you in any way remotely interested in doing it? Because you do a lot already in relation to comments and information and circulation of data.
No. Thank you for all the same, but no. I understand that we need one. I'm very busy with Reed and the work that I've got to do there, and especially with all the things that have suddenly erupted with what's happening around Reed. I'd rather stay out of the secretarial position, but I'm certainly happy to do bits and pieces, and I think when Jane comes back she can do bits and pieces as well, but I think that there are probably other people on the committee that equally could lend a hand as well. But basically I think it's an important position and that somebody should hopefully step up to the plate sometime soon. There's an AGM coming up, isn't there, in October?
Yep.
And,
it's noted up there, you might.
I think this is for
18th of October.
Yeah.
Okay. Other business, let's see if we can get this over and done with
very quickly
in 3 minutes or 7.
Yeah. I just want to make a constructive comment to your question how to follow up on North Watson. There are more stakeholders I think one should bring together beside ACCC, there is a community group in the fair, then Hackett Community Association, and Friends of Mount Natura, who have a great interest in connectivity in this area. And I think we should get together and actually make a plan what we think ought to happen there, and then go to government with that plan. This is what the community wants. And I can facilitate these contacts if you want.
That sounds like a great idea. At least don't ask me to organise them.
No,
it's all right. But I'm sure NCCC would be more than happy to participate in anything should you need it. Okay, does anybody else have any other business? Going once, going twice. Geez, it's 11 minutes to 10. We're only 19 minutes over time. We've done all right. Thank you very much, everybody, for